Here, I got a question for you. How does a 7% interest rate sound to you guys on a home mortgage today? So as we're recording this, how does 7% interest rate sound to you guys? High, exactly. What are you comparing it to? Which are? 3.5. Okay, now I have an important question for you. What percentage of customers calling into a mortgage call center is going to ask the question, what's your interest rate? And let me tell you, what I'm going to share with you now applies to everyone in this room in every attempt to get a yes. What percentage of customers is going to ask, what's your interest rate? I did a study on this, Russ. It's somewhere between 100% and 100%. And where are they going to ask that question? Early. So, Doug, you call in, and I'm an average loan officer, and what's the first question you ask? Oh, that's a great question, Doug. Today's rates range anywhere from 3.5% to 7%. Here at our bank, we have access to more than a dozen programs. My job is to find the right program for you guys, and it's based on 3 criteria, Doug. First is going to be your equity. That's the amount of the home you actually own. Second is going to be your credit. With your permission, we'll take a look at your credit report, your FICO score. Third is going to be your income. He's not listening anymore. What interest rate is he sure he wants? And this is a mistake you guys make every day. This is called bad framing. Guys, I want you to write down the word framing. It is an incredibly important concept for getting to yes. Framing. If I share 2 numbers with you, and they're interest rates, and it's 3.5 to 7%, I've now created a frame. Within that frame, what interest rate do you want? 3.5, right? What's the problem with that? What's the problem with that? Well, not everyone. Let me tell you, I'm telling you a story that was happening in 1999. The only people this bank were mailing to had credit problems. No one was going to get 3.5%. In fact, the best they were going to do with this company was 7%. And at the end of this call, when I take a look at your credit and offer you 7%, what were thousands of customers a week doing? Hanging up. Why? Because that's bad framing. But what's the real problem with that? That guy then spent the next 6 months trying to get something that wasn't even available to him. No matter what, we did him a disservice. We did him a disservice. He spends the next 6 months looking for 3.5, and he don't qualify for that. So now I sit down next to this top rep, right, Russ? His name was Curtis. I sit down next to this top rep. First customer calls in is Rachel. I've been picking on you too much. Is BJ. BJ calls in. What's BJ's first question?
What's your rate?
That's exactly what we're going to find out together, BJ. Do you have a pen and a piece of paper handy?
I do.
Terrific. How long you lived in your home?
10 years.
10 years. And what do you do for a living, BJ?
I own a business.
So he's already into the application, isn't he? He asked me for an interest rate. Have I given him one yet? Yes or no? Have I created any framing yet? Yes or no? No. It's a good thing I didn't, because you know what I found out? 10 years ago when he bought that house, he's since refinanced at 3.5%. which is an awesome rate. But you know what he did just over a year ago? He wanted to redo his kitchen. And he got a credit card offer, was $45,000. It was a 0% offer. They wanted to redo the kitchen, him and his wife. So they did. They took that. By the way, he forgot he needed to have it paid off. You know why he's calling today? Last month, that year expired. And guess what his statement says? Guess what the interest rate is on that $45,000? 24.99%. You know what this rep says? BJ, boy, am I glad you called, because we're going to stop those people from stealing from you today. And let me tell you how we're going to do it. First thing, we're not going to touch that 3.5% that you got. That's awesome. Don't let anyone mess with that. But we're going to touch that 24.9. Here's how we're going to do it. We're going to issue you a single home equity line, $45,000 at 7% to replace the 24.9. It's going to do three things for you. First thing it's going to do, it's going to lower your monthly payments almost $1,800 a month. Second thing, the interest is now a tax deduction, because it's part of your home loan. It wasn't before. Third thing it's going to do, you're not going to have any payments with us for 60 days. And what does BJ say to that 7%? Looks good. He goes right into it. Next customer calls in. Sarah. Totally different customer than BJ, but what's Sarah's first question? First question when she calls in. That's exactly what we're going to find out together, Sarah. Do you have a pen and a piece of paper handy? Mm-hmm. What do you do for a living? Excellent. How long have you lived in your home?
3 months.
Oh, brand new. By the way, he's found out some very important information, hasn't he? Guess what? Is it going to be of value to her to refinance her home loan if she just got it 3 months ago? Yes or no? So he knows he can't go there. When he looks at the credit report, you know what he finds? And this is pretty common with people who are new to homes. She's got now, because of all the stuff she just bought to furnish her home, she's got 10 small credit cards. She just maxed them out. She was waiting till she moved in, $3,000 on each card. And you know what? She now owes $30,000 on credit cards. And when this guy has her write down with that pen all of the interest rates, she's averaging 19%. And the rep says, boy, am I glad you called in, Sarah. Let me tell you why. Because the way you are now, the way your debt is extended, it's really hitting your FICO score, and we're going to improve that immediately for you. But let me tell you 3 things we're going to do. Number 1, we're not going to touch that first loan that you just got a few months ago. I don't want you to incur all those mortgage fees, etc. I am going to touch those credit cards, though. We're going to issue a single home equity line at 7%. We're going to pay off $30,000 in 10 credit cards. At the end of every month now, you're not going to be writing 10 checks. The checks are going to come from us. It's going to be a tax deduction because it's now part of your home loan. And here's the best news. You're not going to have any payments at all for 60 days. And what does she do? She goes right into the loan. Guys, what are you hearing this second rep doing that the first rep wasn't doing? Guys, look at the second card. If you look at the second of the 7 cards, you'll see it says ask. I want you to write this primary rule of getting yes as your first bullet point under ask. Are you ready? The person asking the questions does what? Controls the conversation. When a customer asks you, what's your interest rate? Who's just taking control of the conversation? The customer. So Curtis was prepared. He was prepared. What was the best practice? You heard him do it. Customer asked, what's your interest rate? What did Curtis then do? Come on, tell me. Remember, the first step here is to identify best practices. You heard me do it twice. That's not what he did. But it's close. It's actually 3 parts. Customer asks, what's your interest rate? That's exactly what we're going to find out together. Do you have a pen and a piece of paper? Terrific. How long have you lived in your home? When it comes to best practices, you need to be exact. So you're not ready to roll it out because you don't have the science to explain how that works. I'm going to share it with you right now. The science is in these 3 buckets. And this is framing. So this is the concept called perceptual contrast in behavioral psychology. So I have 3 buckets here. I'm going to fill the middle bucket with room temperature water. This bucket right here. Room temperature water. I'm going to fill this bucket here on the left with ice water. Almost freezing, ice cold water. I'm going to fill this bucket over here on the right with hot water. Almost boiling hot water. Now I bring you guys up here, one at a time. I take your left hand, I put it in the ice water. I take your right hand and I put it in the hot water, and I hold them both there. Now I take them both out and I put them in the room temperature water. How does the hand that was in the ice water, how does it feel the room temperature water? Hot. How does the hand that was in the hot water, how does it feel the room temperature water? Cold. Did the middle bucket change? What changed? Let me give you the definition. You ready? You can change how people feel about anything based on what you structure for them to feel before that thing. I'm going to say this again. You can change how people feel about anything based on what you structure for them to feel before that thing. If I want you to feel the middle bucket as cold, what should I put your hand in first? Hot. I don't just bring you up here and say, what do you think? How does a 7% interest rate feel? Well, if you're comparing it to the 3.5% you can get now, how does 7% feel? Too high. What was this rep comparing it to? What was he sticking your hand in first? 24.9. How does 7% feel now? So 2 important lessons here. Here's the first lesson. Is there a question that you know you're always going to get asked before you try to get a yes? In the mortgage business, the question is, what was your interest rate? If there's a question that you know you're always going to get asked, what maybe should you take some time to figure out? The best practice for handling that and why that works. Does that make sense? Guys, once we identified this best practice and rolled it out, and validated it and rolled it out, what do you think that one best practice meant to that bank in terms of their results getting yeses? They doubled within 6 months. They doubled their production within 6 months of answering this question. and figuring out how to roll that out to everyone so that they can make it their own. Here's the second lesson here. Before you go into any situation, I want you to ask yourself, what do I want that person to feel? Questions create the frame. First bullet point, questions control the conversation. Second bullet point, questions create the frame. Third bullet point, what do I want them to feel? Start with the end in mind. What do you want that person to feel, and how can you structure an environment for them to feel that way? All right, so I want you to take a moment right now, before we go on to the next card. I want you to take out your personal action summary. If I've triggered any thinking within this ask card, I want you to think about the targets you need a yes from. What's the framing you want? What are the questions you're going to ask to create the right frame?